Good morning, everyone, and welcome. This is the AIM Award Best Practice webinar. We're joined today with half a dozen people in-house, and we have over 50 people from 8 states participating from around the U.S. So thank you very much for taking the time to join us this morning. For those that are not familiar, this is the 24th annual AIM Award. The AIM Award celebrates outstanding achievement in organizational management. These are the 3 finalists and the winner of this year's award, who I'll introduce in a second. And all of them participated in a 3-part process. The first 2 parts were written essays, where they wrote extensively on various areas of management practices that they do. And then on those that made it to the finals, which was these 3 organizations, hosted the judges for an on-site visit, where we did an even more extensive, in-depth conversation on their management practices. Our goal today is to share the best of what we learned. We're focusing today on communications. There will be another webinar on coming up. Check your email for it. We will send you an email inviting you to that as well. The award would not be possible without our presenting sponsor, Pepco Holdings. So a special thank you to Pepco Holdings for sponsoring the award. With that, my name is Leon Seaman. I'm your moderator today. I've been a nonprofit executive for over 20 years, helping nonprofits grow by ensuring they are well-funded, well-managed, and well-respected. My passion is solving problems, so the organization can solve bigger problems. In other words, I specialize in fixing nonprofits. I really appreciate participating in these awards because honestly, I've learned from the candidates every year something new and something special. So with that, we are joined today by the winner of the 2017 award, DC Scores, represented by Jake Lloyd, the Director of Digital Communications and Campaigns, and the Executive Director, Bethany Rubin Henderson. We also are joined today by the other 2 finalists, Mary Center, who is represented today by Lida Venegas, Director of Communications and Public Relations, and Hazel Mega, who's the Communications Associate. And finally, and certainly not least, we're joined today by PeacePlayers International, represented by Taylor Brown, the Director of Finance, Human Resources and Administration, and Mandy Murphy, the Head of Growth, Strategy and Development. Thank you all for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
Why don't we start with just a general question for each group, and we'll work down the table. If you could tell us just a little bit about your organization and your experience participating in the AIM Award process and what it has done for you.
Absolutely. So DC Scores is a 23-year-old youth development nonprofit. We go where kids in need are and build neighborhood teams that give those kids the skills and confidence to succeed on the playing field, in the classroom, and in life. And we do it through free after-school programs and summer camps that integrate soccer leagues, poetry and spoken word enrichment, and service projects. We serve over 2,500 kids a year. We do about 350,000 child hours of programming year-round with about 200 community-based coaches that work day in and day out with our kids, and we're the hub of the National America Scores Network as well. For us, being part of this process really forced us to put into one place to think about and reflect on some very significant and intentional changes that we've made in how we operate our organization over the past 3 years. And both in the writing and the talking about it, the creation of the application, the preparation for the interviews, and actually the application documents themselves, we now give to both incoming board members and new staff as sort of a level setting for, hey, here's how we work, here's our philosophy behind why we do what we do from an operational standpoint.
Thank you.
Well, Maricena is a community health organization based here in DC and in Maryland. We serve over 40,000 people in the area. We provide, we have a social change model, which is integrating social medical services, social support, and education. And with that, we have more than 20 programs. We have from medical, dental, behavioral health, social services, insurance enrollment, education, early intervention for children with special needs, so you name it. we've been in the community since 1998. Next year, we're going to be celebrating our 30th anniversary. I've been with Mary Center for 17 years. I came as a patient, so I deeply believe in what we do. In going back to the award, I think this award has given us a unique opportunity. The first one is we're here. Like, you know, when we fill out applications, we're usually putting information about the programs, what we're going to do, how we're going to measure outcomes and success. But with this one, we were looking the back end of the operations, and you guys were asking us things that made us reflect on the work that we do and how innovative we are with each of our departments. We've been learning so much from these that now we want to use it for future applications, and we want to use it for presentations because we see how innovative we are. So it's been really helpful and really nice to feel considered as department in communication, which we never, well, not that we never are, we're always, you know, communicating, but with these applications, we're talking about communication. You care about what we do. You care about what HR does with the staff to make him feel engaged with the organization. So again, was very unique.
Great. So moving on to Peace Players, we're a sport for peace building organization that works internationally with year-round programming in Cyprus, South Africa, Northern Ireland, as on the West Bank. And this past year, in partnership with Nike, we launched a domestic program in the United States. So we have pilot programs running this summer in Baltimore, Detroit, and Brooklyn, with potential expansion to 3 other cities next year. For us, the award process was pretty fantastic. This was our second year applying. So last year we were a top 10 finalist, this year a top 3. And through that process of moving on to the next stage, we kind of saw, and looking back at our application from last year, we saw the incremental growth in our organization from 2016 to 2017, which is really fantastic for us. And then lastly, the other benefit was having the panel of 12 seasoned DC nonprofit execs, you know, that reviewed our application and provided tremendous feedback that we've incorporated into our everyday operations. So that's really been beneficial for us. And then learning more about the Center for Nonprofit Advancement as well. We just came to a membership seminar yesterday, so we're considering that for our organization. So it's been a really wonderful process.
Thank you. Just to highlight two of the things that I heard there that, you know, as a judge that we talk a lot about is the word intentional. One of the things that really breaks out excellence in nonprofit management from just a good organization is the intentionality behind the decision making, and all 3 of these organizations are great examples of making intentional choices, seeing how it works out, and then making modifications as they see the results. And the other is what was said about, you know, we see a lot of organizations apply year over year. And we also get to enjoy and see the growth year over year and see how their application from one year compares to the next. So thank you for participating. The topic of the day is communications. So we're going to focus our questions around things that came up in the application process around communications. Since this is a webinar, it feels like a good place to start is technology. So in no particular order, you know, DC Scores, why don't you tell us a little bit about how you incorporate technology into your communications?
Absolutely. So I'll talk about it a little bit from an internal communications perspective, and Jake will talk about it from an external stakeholders perspective. First thing I will say is we do not have a technology budget. So we use all back-end open source stuff, right? So we're a Google Drive, Google Groups, Google Mail, Google Calendar organization. And what is really great about that is it's very transparent. So we have an online Google Drive that the whole organization shares and is organized that folks can access anytime, that we can control access to by giving people limited access to certain parts of it. So we're even able to keep, for example, HR documents in a separate private part that only certain staff can access. We use Google Calendars, and we use calendars aggressively. Our team knows that the word calendar is sacred in our organization. Everything goes in the calendar. And what that means is that every staff member can see every other staff member's calendar. So it makes it very easy to schedule meetings, to see where people are, to get a hold of people, to know what's going on. Everybody, I'm the executive director. Everybody can see my calendar. The intern can see my calendar, and vice versa. And that's really important because it allows us to, we're only 12 full-time staff. We're supporting 2,500 kids. We're running around constantly. It allows us to really have that level of transparency and communication without pausing to be like, hey, what are you doing now? We also do weekly emails for all stakeholders. So there's two weekly all staff emails. One Jake sends that focus on more organizational activities. I think you have some examples of that we can share later. And one that I send that focuses on what each of the different departments are doing. So everybody starts the week understanding sort of what's going on organization-wide, which of the departments are doing, where DC Scores focus is for the week. We do a similar weekly email to board members, also follows the same template every week, so they know what to expect and what to look for. And it includes 4 elements: a smile, so something that connects them to the mission, a picture, typically, or a video, or a story. Important things board members should know. So that could be, hey, we got this great grant, or hey, here's a big program thing coming up, or there's a board meeting coming up and you need to know about it, right? Those things. A micro ask. The micro ask could be, hey, could you retweet this? Hey, could you donate on Giving Tuesday? Hey, could you come to this event? And then sort of upcoming calendar dates. Here's the next 6 weeks of calendar dates that are relevant to board. And I should mention we also have a board Google Calendar. So board members, all the stuff gets pushed to their calendar as well. And then last but not least, we have a coaches weekly email as well. So we support about 200 community-based coaches that deliver our programming. Every week they get an email targeted to what point it is in the season, what information they need to have. The important thing with all of our internal stakeholder communications is that it's very structured. So every communication follows the same format every week, so people know what to look for. They know where to look in different communications for different types of information, and they know what to expect. So that's how we use technology to smooth communications and workflow when we've got folks scattered all over the city running in 18 different directions. That's the internal side. Talk about the external a bit.
Well, I think it's a good segue here is that right now our entire staff knows that the two of us are on this panel, and externally, Lorena, our incredible social media person, is probably tweeting about this right now. So because we are running all over the community and speaking on different panels and going to different presentations, and we have game days on Thursday and Friday, and then another event where a staff member is representing volunteer fairs every week, it's really hard for me or Lorena, who does, helps me with social media, to know everything that's going on without the internal communications that Bethany talked about. And really our main strategy with our social media platforms, we're on 7 or 8 platforms, is to give and also receive. So especially, I'm going to use the example of Twitter. Twitter is our most active platform. We are very close to about 5,000 followers. We've been on it for about 7.5 years. With Twitter, at any event that we are presenting at or have a presence at, we are tweeting about it because A, we want people to know all the different places throughout the DC community where we are. We're not just running programming. We are sharing best practices. We are talking in different advocacy circles, whether you're talking about childhood obesity or the link between academics and sports or any other aspect of our program. And B, we want to give shout outs to all of the partners who are helping to fund DC Scores to make our program possible for 2,500 kids. So if we're at a Volkswagen Group of America event, we are giving them a shout out at the very least on Twitter for hosting that event for our kids. If we have a bunch of kids going to a DC United game, DC United being our official community partner, we are definitely posting about that on Twitter, probably sharing a photo on Instagram, posting about it on Facebook, and then they're probably usually retweeting that, sharing it out to their larger audiences. So regardless of where we are, and it extends well beyond our regular day-to-day programming, we want people to know what's going on, and we want to share the love with all of these community partners, with these companies, with anyone who is a part of the greater DC Scores family. And that's how we use those platforms.
Yeah, and the last thing I would add is that a lot of our families, so we work with 8 to 14-year-old kids, roughly, elementary and middle school. And a lot of the family members come to the games, which is great, but oftentimes they can't be with the kids all the time. And so they follow us on social media, on Instagram often, on Twitter, on other places. And so it's a way that parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, relatives, et cetera, can keep up with what their kids' teams are doing, because we tag the school, we tag the kids, and we have media releases for all of our kids. We actually set that up at the beginning when kids register for the program. And families love it because they're able to virtually follow along with their kids, whether their kid is at a game day, whether their kid is performing a poem at some event like this, or whether their child is at a DC United game.
Well, I'll go over the different tools that we use, and I'll have Hazel talk about the website, blogs, and other tools that she specifically is in charge of. So I shared with Bethany that calendars are very important. What happens with us is that we're almost 600 employees, so it's hard for everyone to see everyone's calendar, right? But we do have calendars, and each supervisor allows certain staff members to see the calendars. So not everybody does, but we do. Like Hazel can see where I am, and my colleagues here can do that. I can see where our president is, so when I get a media request or an invitation, I know if she's available. But we use, and as all nonprofits, we're always using all the online tools that are available out there that are free and at low cost. So of course, social media, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube, we have become not experts, but we've been using a lot the in-house YouTube videos. So we are always with a camera and doing videos with the staff or with the patients, filming the stories, or filming, if it's, let's say, flu season, let's have a doctor talking about that, and then we post it on YouTube. But we also use it to inform the staff at the other locations. We have 8 locations. So we do the video, and then we have a monthly newsletter, and then we post the link, and hey, learn about the nutrition, National Nutrition Month. Here's the link where our director of the week will be talking about this, so everybody can see it. We also have TV screens at each waiting room of all of our locations, the medical locations. So patients from our desk, we can upload information and it goes right away to the TV screens. So all of our patients, while they wait to be seen, they can see the screen, they can learn about new activities, free activities, new programs, and new staff members. If there's something going on, if there's a party, whatever that we feel that would be interesting for them to know. So then we put that information out there. We have a mobile app. So a mobile app, and this could be another webinar to talk about what not to do when you are developing a mobile app, but we developed it and we're still struggling a little bit, but it's been a great experience, because a mobile app is what will put us out there as one of the nonprofits that has mobile app, which is unique, I think. But it's been great. I can share some of those experiences later. So we have the patient portal. So we communicate, lab results, or patients can ask questions to our providers through the patient portal, and also for the board. They have a board portal, so we're not inundating them with information for the meetings. We, as a federally qualified health center, we're required to have monthly meetings, which is not usual at most of the boards. So with that, Emily, who's here, and she's the board liaison, she's the one who communicates with them directly, and our president, because our board, as all of our board members, they're busy with their daytime jobs. And in addition to that, they need to take care of our board requests, which are a lot. And we have 6 committees within our board. So there's some board members that are part of the finance committee, development committee, audit committee. So it's a lot. So we don't want them to get inundated with so many emails from the communications informing about whatever is happening. So everything goes through our board liaison. That's another way to communicate. Google Analytics, so we're always checking what's working on our website, the visits, who is going to our website, what are they seeing, how much time they're staying. Our blogs have been so effective. We've seen through Google Analytics that every time we post a blog, we get around 300 to 400 visits to our website. And Hazel, she's specifically working very hard on keeping our website updated, keeping our staff working on blogs, sharing information with us. So maybe she can talk about that.
Thank you. So one of the things that I wanted to piggyback on the DC Scores mentioned was giving the shout outs to the sponsors. Yeah. So we've seen that they like that very much, and they're willing to share that. And I would say follow your sponsors, and then also follow your other donors, and they'll follow you back usually. So that's a good way to grow your social media followers. I would also say that for YouTube, sometimes nonprofits don't have the resources or a person who can be dedicated to that. But I would say try to use volunteers as well, and also staff members who have that skill. You'd be surprised how many people are willing to help you out. So you can find a young person in the community or a college student who's willing to intern and help you out with that, or somebody in the organization who just wants to help out. So do use the resources that are available to you. That's been very successful for us, actually. In terms of writing the blogs, I do try to write a lot, but there's topics that I don't know, very specific medical topics or something like that. So we've been very successful in engaging our staff members to write blogs as well. So it allows them to share their expertise. It sets them up as experts. They can, put that on their resumes or whatever. So again, do use the resources that are available to you. We engage our staff members also in asking them to participate in our videos, asking them to do media appearances. Our social media, some organizations control that very tightly, who has access to the passwords and who can post on behalf of the organization. We have, it's not just the communications team, because we're a very small team. We're just 2 people, really, so we can't do everything. So we've actually asked other departments to join us in that effort. We've trained them. We've given them the skills they need. We've told them and shown them the kind of tone that we want to have. And then they are able to, when they go to organizations, they can live tweet or they can, post things on social media. So that helps us. We can't be everywhere. And so we kind of extend the reach of the communications department by empowering other people within the organization. I also wanted to go back to the idea of the television screens that we have in our waiting rooms. So specifically, technology is called App Space. And so that's very good for us. As Lita said, we have 8 locations in DC and Maryland. Very hard to keep all the patients up to date, but this technology has been great for us. So we just put our upload slides right from our desk. If anything changes in the organization, any announcements, any new developments, like today we're having a breastfeeding celebration at one of our locations. So we can put that information out to patients at all locations to let them know about it. And then also we can specifically target, if there's only a certain location that we want to advertise to, we can target to one particular location. That's a very useful technology that's been very, very helpful for us.
Great. So for Peace Players, if we're talking technology, I have to think back to 7 years ago when I was working in Durban, South Africa, back in 2010. And technology was an interesting word in South Africa because I had an $8 flip phone. The internet was capped at 12 gigs a month for our office, and I didn't have internet in my house. So it's definitely come a long way. All of our fellows and the people at our international sites have smartphones now. So the way we collaborate and communicate is through free technology like Skype and WhatsApp and Viber and things like that, which has really helped improve our communication as opposed to simply emailing. So the email versus texting versus WhatsApp messaging has helped really improve our internal communication globally. Since we're not just in DC, we're operating in 5 countries, multiple continents, etc. So that's been pretty huge for us over the last 7 years since I've been involved.
Yeah, I would echo the WhatsApp was critical. I just got back from some overseas business trips, whether we were in Ireland or Israel. We had a group text, whether it was with coaches or with staff, and it really was a good way to share real-time updates to schedules, to photo sharing, and just really keeping in touch with folks. Our international folks can't live without WhatsApp. We use it a lot. In addition, as many of the others shared, we do use our Google calendars and Gmail and all the like. I think the other thing that we've been tried, I'm fairly new to the team, and it's been really helpful for me on a weekly basis. We do, in addition to just kind of sharing what we have going on, we have accountability and helpfulness reports, and it's really part of our culture to kind of see how we can help each other, and really not just about what is my day-to-day job, but how can I use the resources we have technology-wise to help each other. So, we're, as with everyone, a very lean and mean team. So what's going on in Northern Ireland, how can that help what's emerging in Detroit, and how we can share with each other to help grow what we're doing. The other thing, as folks have said, is kind of leaning on the resources and best practices from our partners and support to help amplify what we're doing. As Taylor mentioned, we've embarked over the last several months in a great collaboration with the team at Nike, and they have a bigger digital footprint than we could ever hope to have. So they've connected us with some agency support so that we can help. We're in the process of updating our website and really looking at our social channels and how we can whone in on where the technology efforts are and where they can identify how they can help us grow what we're doing. So we can, show love to our partners, but they can also help give us their expertise to grow what we're doing and give those resources to our coaches and our volunteers and everyone who's working on behalf of these players.
And back to one of the challenges with our organization too is I was on a 7 o'clock call this morning and, on Zoom with our staff in Israel. And, having that time difference presents a big challenge for us around communication and collaboration and technology, and the free technology sources that we use help us in our business operations immensely. Otherwise it'd be, let's wait till tomorrow. You're not available then within this hour and a half wingspan, hour and a half time span where you're available, then let's talk next week. So to have technology where you can just hop on calls from home through Zoom or Skype is very, very helpful.
And that's a social media challenge as well. Like when I'm tweeting about things that are happening with our affiliate network in Seattle or in Bay Area or in LA, I have to remind myself, maybe I shouldn't tweet this at 9:30. Maybe I should wait until noon until people are actually checking it out.
So a couple of takeaways I took from all that, and thank you, one is it doesn't necessarily take a lot of money to get into the game. Everyone here was talking about the free tools that are out there. Two is data sharing and how you can use the cloud and some of these free tools to make sure everyone's on the same page and getting that information out from an internal communications perspective. I liked especially everyone talked about extending the reach through staff, through volunteers, through partners, through sponsors. You don't have to start big. You have friends. Use your friends to extend the platform. As a follow-up question to what we were just talking about, if each group could say the one thing you did to make your social media bigger, to get more people to follow you on social media. Let's start with anyone.
One of the things that has worked for us in communication to get new friends or to get people to like us is when we post funny pictures or fun pictures, not funny pictures, but fun pictures, pictures that engage, that attract people. Like when we do the I Heart Mary Center, and so we had all types of staff from our president to group pictures. So that type of things that not only talk about the pride that we have as staff members to work there, but about other activities like the National Nutrition Month, when we had, again, our staff, but also participants, children, patients, eating something healthy and encouraging people to eat healthy by showing like all the types of healthy foods that we have around us. That was very successful, I think, right?
I would also say that, kind of elaborating a little bit on what I said earlier, just make a list of all your sponsors, your partners, people who are writing about the topic, like the sector that you work in, and then follow those people, and then they'll be likely to follow you back. So we have done that very comprehensively, and it's been very successful.
Yeah, I mean, Twitter lists are great because regardless of how many thousands of people you might be following, you can filter them down into lists. So for us, we have a health and nutrition list, and we have a poetry list, and we have a news and media list. So I can spend 5 minutes a day just browsing the most recent 25 or 50 tweets from those lists. One thing that I would highly recommend, and that's easy to do, is like. Mm-hmm. I try to like at least 100 tweets a day. You're not putting it on your platform, but you are letting people know that, hey, you like their tweet, they're getting a notification on their phone, maybe by email, maybe on their desktop. They know that you're liking their tweet. They're more likely to come back, like your stuff, follow your stuff, maybe even retweet it. Number one is just produce good content on social media. If you are posting tweets with no photos and no links and no video, just text tweets or long Facebook posts, like the average attention span these days is 8 seconds. You need to keep it short, make the language fun, and include really engaging photos and videos whenever possible. And you need to do it consistently. If you only post, if you post on Facebook and then you forget about it, or let's say and this is true for a lot of small nonprofits. Let's say you don't have a person dedicated to communications, so they forget about it because they're running your program, but then you don't post again for 3 weeks. That's not consistent, and people are just not going to see your content and engage with it. You need, whether it's once a week on Facebook or 2 tweets a day or 3 Instagram posts a week, just try to find some kind of consistency with your social media so that people know you're going to be putting stuff out there. And if you're putting engaging content out there consistently, you'll gain followers as long as you're giving the love as well as receiving it.
Something that, if you don't mind, I would like to recommend also is that, and has worked very well for us, is when we have events. So we try to prepare in advance. And we know if, let's say, it's a Taste of Adams Morgan, where we have 20 or 25 restaurants that are supporting the event. So before the event, we take the time to do the list of those restaurants or those sponsors, those supporters. We look for the Twitter accounts. We follow them. So the day of the event, we're prepared already, and we're already following them. We also get ready the messages of that we want to convey that day. If we have the golf tournament or again the Taste of Adams Morgan, we want to thank them for the support and to mention the type of food and to invite people to come to the event. So we get them ready, because the moment when you get to the event, you will be so busy taking photos and making sure that everything works well, that if you have handy what you're preparing for, then you just take the photo and you already have the message, you have the Twitter handle, instead of trying to find what's their account. So it takes time and before then, but the day off will be very effective. So that's something else that has helped a lot.
So I wanted to add one more thing to that. And to talk about the consistency. So one thing that we found that's very helpful is a very affordable tool called Hootsuite. And I know that there are many other platforms out there that can help you to do that. So you can just pre-schedule all your, that person who's responsible for social media can just take a certain amount of time a week to schedule all the posts for the rest of the week or for however long. And so that helps you definitely. You don't have to worry about it again. It's just the content is just published, pre-scheduled.
Yeah, I think from our side, quite candidly, we're limited in that area at the moment. I just came on a few weeks ago, and we're looking to, as everyone said, getting different intern and other support in that area. But just over the last several weeks and months, looking at working with our partners, as people say, tapping into existing conversations, right? So, we've seen history of where we actually can collate things via a hashtag to engage that dialogue. Has been really helpful. The other piece as well, I think, is user-generated content in terms of, we only have so many resources to put out some of our own content, but a lot of our participants and coaches have great photos and videos of their own to share that we can then reshare and share those farther and wider beyond kind of our existing constituent base. So as we kind of look at our existing platforms and how we can grow, that's something that we're hopefully going to tap our existing audience to help grow those channels.
One of the things that I think comes up in social media, especially for board members, is you hear the importance of social media. You hear that, especially in generational gaps, from a board member's perspective, there's unlimited options to do social media. There's millions of things that they've never heard of. So how do you measure and present to the board the value of participating in social media? Because on one aspect, it seems so overwhelming. If I have no person dedicated, how do I participate at all? But if you don't participate at all, you're missing a great opportunity. So the bridge to that is explaining value. So how would you explain value? Or how do you measure value, more importantly?
So I think this is a difficult question because some of it is just maintaining the conversation, and that's hard to quantify how important it is to just be part of that conversation. What I focus on is Jake does a really masterful job of using social media around crowdfunding days. And so for us, that's a very easily quantifiable. I'll let Jake talk about how he structures that. That's very easily quantifiable because our 2 crowdfunding days, Giving Tuesday, and then here in DC, Do More 24, which is a Giving Tuesday in June, equivalent for the region, are all social media based. And so we can directly point to the impact of the return there. Whereas if we had not maintained those platforms throughout the year in a meaningful way, those returns would certainly be much lower.
Yeah, I mean, Do More 24, every donor lists a reason for why they gave. And just thinking back to this past year, we had several that were Facebook or Twitter. So that right there means that our social media is having an impact. I actually think back to a longtime donor of ours who found us originally on Twitter, and whom I actually never met. And she ended up moving to Boston a few years ago, but she still gives during every campaign. And she found out about DC Scores through Twitter, learned enough about our work. Obviously, we would have loved to have her out to a soccer game day or to a poetry slam, but she stayed connected with us. She engaged with us, and every giving day she gave through Twitter. So, I mean, Bethany's right. It can be hard to quantify just kind of the larger visibility that we're talking about with why we post about our impact in our program. We talk about DC Scores being the best kept secret in DC, and we want more and more people to hear about us because we think they'll want to support us if they know what we're doing, and especially if they see us in action. But we have seen through our platforms, especially around Giving Tuesday and Do More 24, that people do give solely because they see our content on social media.
And it's a viral opportunity. So it's not just that we're pushing. We push content, that's great, but that's limited. Social media platforms are the new water cooler, right? That's something I talk about, but, you know, that's the way millennials communicate. That's the way we share information, right? That's the way you sort of say, hey, this is cool, check this out. Giving days allow you to really laser focus on that. And you can see kind of the sharing and what goes on. And Jake has a structure where every staff member and every volunteer is supposed to, you know, and every board member has 5 folks. They push it out to on social media, and it creates that effect, have those people share it as well. But that is the new water cooler conversation. And the other way that we look at it, although we don't report to board members on this, probably we should, is the engagements. So city council members' offices engage with us on social media. Our school partners engage with us on social media. Our coaches engage with us. When I say engage with us, they like, they follow, they respond, they tweet at, they share our content. Sometimes there's more substantive reactions that we get as well. But that type of engagement amplifies far beyond what our 12 full-time people could actually do. We could not be having all those conversations in all those different rooms if we had to be physically face-to-face. And so it allows us to continue the conversations with many different types of partners, supporters, participants in a more robust way than we have, you know, the human time to do one-on-one.
I would explain that one of the main goals for any communications department is to increase awareness about the work of the organization and to bring visibility to the work that we do. So social media is the best way to bring free advertisement, free naming opportunities about the organization and about the programs that we have, and engagement again. So we're there. We don't have to pay. We have free advertising. While when I get grants to pay for some ads, I would be paying at least $700 for one ad one day in the newspaper. With social media, you can be posting as many times the same ad for free. So that just brings so much attention to the work that we do, right?
There's also a lot of value for in terms of events, because some of our smaller events, we don't promote them, you know, through paid advertising, but we just use social media, just hammering that message that, hey, next week we have this, you know, save the date. And the event is now 2 days away. Today is the day, you know, just building up that excitement on social media, and the attendance will be good because of, you know, only because people have heard about it through social media. So that's the value for us.
So I mean, what I heard in that response was, first of all, the objective is awareness more than an actual transactional. I mean, there are transactional social media, but awareness. So explaining to the board that the objective is about awareness. I also heard possible measures, instead of talking about number of followers, talking about number of retweets and likes and how much the message is getting out there. So thank you. One of our audience members posted asking, you know, we talked about consistency. Is there a target frequency for how often you should post?
My general rule of thumb is it depends on the platform. On Twitter, you should be trying to post daily, and I aim for about 3 to 6 tweets. Now, it's important to remember on Twitter, you don't want to just promote your brand. So if you think about it, there are 3 tweets that are above what's called the Twitter fold. Basically, if somebody goes to your profile, they're going to see the 3 tweets, then they're going to see follow so-and-so, so-and-so, which are like accounts similar to DC Scores. And then below the fold, you'll see the rest of our tweets. If all 3 tweets above the fold are just you promoting something that's happening with your organization, that might turn people off. The goal should be have those 3 tweets be a mix of tweets and retweets, and then have that continue to be the theme throughout your Twitter feed, so that you are giving love to people, but also posting about what's happening with you, giving shout outs to others. So you want to have that balance with your Twitter feed. With Facebook, I've gone to almost never more than 1 post a day, unless it's like a huge event, and 3 to 5 posts a week, I think, is best practice there. And then with Instagram, which is our other main platform, about once a day, sometimes twice a day. So between 5 and 7 posts a week, I think, is best practice.
Do you want to?
Well, as he was talking, I was just thinking that people might be wondering, where am I going to get all the content to be able to be posting so frequently? One of the things that's, again, worked very well for us is to just develop relationships with other people in your departments, the programs people, so that they can give you information, so they know that you're looking for content and you want to highlight their work, you want to show off, what they're doing. So that's how you can generate enough content. People will start bringing the information to you. First of all, you have to go out and get it, and then after a while, they'll start sending you information. Hey, our department did this. Can you put this? So that's how you generate enough content to keep that going.
I would agree that the consistency depends on which platform we're talking about. We're in the effort right now, just in terms of planning, of looking at kind of our calendar across the board, and for the next 12 to 18 months, what are the key dates and events, and what do we need to focus on? Because as everyone's saying here, you can't be everything to everyone. So what are the key priorities for us? And then where can we make sure that those regional offices are focused in on that particular day where we can amplify things. The other thing I would say too is just in terms of what's happening in any given news cycle, is I use the word a lot, newsjack, of like, can you newsjack what's going on, what people are talking about? So we did a post the other day it was Mandela Day, and so we're talking about the power of sport to change the world, because that was a trending hashtag. It was recycled content that we've used before, but it got a lot of sharing. So talking about what's going on, a lot of people got on the eclipse conversation the other day, right? I mean, it's your content, but I think, as you say, balance that with what else is going on, so that you can be part of the overall digital conversation.
That's a really good point, Mandy. I mean, there is a day for everything now. There is a week for everything. There is a month for everything. And for all of those, there's a national day and there's an international day. I mean, there is so much happening, a lot of which in some shape or form ties into what we're doing, that you could solely just tweet every day about some trending hashtag. I don't know what it is today. Has anyone looked it up? I don't know. But the eclipse. Like, we tweeted about the eclipse. Does it have anything to do with DC scores? Not really, but that was something fun to tie into. One thing that really hurt us, actually, and this just speaks to how people get consumed by what's going on, especially in the current news cycle that we live in, is Do More 24 was the same day as the James Comey hearing. So, like, everyone who we were trying to reach out to through individual outreach and whatnot was just not really paying attention, or didn't have time, at least during that hearing, to give. And, giving picked up later in the day once that was over. But you do kind of have to think about, when you're on these social media platforms, okay, what is happening right now in the world? Is it a good time to be tweeting about this? Should I wait until later? Will it get lost? Because it easily can, with everything that's happening.
And to elaborate on those commemorations, something that has worked very well for us is that we have an action plan. So we plan for the next 6 months, if possible for the next year. We already know that when it's like Children's Dental Health Month, or we know when it's National Nutrition Month again, like that's the one that I've been thinking of, like all those health commemoration or things that relate to our work, and we put it in the calendar. And then we start thinking, okay, we have our gala in October. We have our golf outing in May. We have Taste of Adams Morgan in June. So we start putting the dates that we already know that we'll be working around. So then, and with the time, we keep adding to that calendar. And then we start planning again, like, what's the hashtag? What are the messages? Are we going to do a video? Do we want to write a blog? Is it a website post, or is it social media? And what's the messaging around that? So if we prepare ahead of time, we're already at least halfway. So when the day comes, we know that there's something, and even for Hootsuite, we can have that schedule. So that has worked very well too.
Thank you. And we started the day talking about intentionality. So having a communications plan, using tools to get ahead of the schedule is a real effective tool in helping, especially small communications departments get ahead of the curve instead of always feeling like they're playing catch up. So thank you for pointing that out. Switching gears a little, we're talking a lot about digital. I think one of the things that struck me personally when I was reading all of your applications is you all do newsletters. And we think of newsletters as, grandpa's communication tool. But especially like PeacePlayers talked about their success with newsletters. So can you tell us about why you chose to stay with newsletter, what it does for you, and what its future is?
So, and Tara can add in here, because like I said, I'm just a couple of weeks in, but one of the things I noticed when I came in, we use MailChimp as our kind of platform at the moment. And we have, give or take, probably 8,000 or so unique people that we reach through that. And just in looking at the history of our newsletter, we've been able to revamp that. It's called the Monthly Huddle. When we put that out and what content's in it, to target that content based on when we're putting it out. The last issue that we did a few weeks ago, we led with some of our partnership news, with what we were doing with Nike and their equality campaign and how we fit into that. And that helped our open rate tremendously based on the way that we targeted the content. So I think the traditional open rate on a smaller nonprofit probably being 15 or so %. We're tracking at between 21 and 23%, which is really good for us. We hope that as we move forward in targeting those newsletters, I think as some others are saying, highlighting partner content is critical for us, but also that first person story, so that when people see themselves highlighted in our newsletter, it's a way to thank them. And we also strategically are just doing them once a month so that people aren't over inundated with getting regular communications. They can know when to expect something from us, which has been really, really consistently good, I think.
And with us, it's a great way for kind of staff recognition as well. Not monetary recognition. This is more HR focused, but whether it's a coach of the month, right? And that goes out to our entire network, and that person's highlighted. So it's a great way to recognize staff for a job well done, in a way that's, again, cost effective, and it's a non-monetary reward that people really value.
In addition to those newsletters, which we also do a little bit less frequently digitally, we do a twice a year print news. I don't know what you call it. We have an example the center can share with you. We call it Scoop. And we find that using that print at very targeted audiences cuts through some of the noise. Everybody gets a lot of stuff in email, right? I don't know about you guys. My email box is flooded constantly, and I'm constantly unsubscribing from things. This is not the same time urgency, but it has the same effects as what PeacePlayers folks just talked about. And it cuts through the clutter. So people get in the mailbox, they actually look at it because it's so unusual to get that kind of content in the mail. We also use handwritten cards a lot, which is a little bit different from newsletters. But our staff practices, we just have note cards that say DC scores, just little, 4x6 cards. And when we meet somebody new, there's somebody we want to show appreciation to, somebody does something very nice to us, a coach gets some acknowledgement in the community, our staff dashes off a handwritten card. Or if it's somebody's birthday on our network or something, we want to be like, hey, we're thinking about you. We all sign the card, straight happy birthday, we all sign it. And that also we find is a really good communication tool to cut through the clutter. Again, it's not transactional. It tends to be in recognition or just sort of a cultivation touch. But we hear over and over and over again that people don't get anything in the mail anymore that's not a form letter, right? And so that's just been a really nice tool for us to rise above the clutter.
I would say that for Mary Center, and I'll have Jesus explain a little bit about what we include in the newsletter, but I remember when I started at Mary Center many years ago, we didn't have communications department. And so as a background in communications and journalism, I decided to write a newsletter. And since then, it's one of my most favorite publications because we put so much love to it, because it's the moment where we can recognize the staff. We have internal and external newsletter. And so what I found at that time is that there was lack of communication. Staff doesn't know what's going on internally and externally, or whatever is happening in the organization. And now with so many locations, it's hard to know. But with that, we try to make people pride and happy to share their stories, and they said they're the ones now that they take it so personal. So they open, and it's funny, they open, we have 4 or 5 pages, and they go straight to the birthdays. They want to know whose birthday is, and they are always sharing those personal moments that they find interesting to share with the staff. So they send us the wedding pictures, the babies, the new babies. So through that communication that we get from the staff after we send it out is how we see the importance that they give to that mean of communication. And Hazel will explain about it. I'm sorry. But the other one is the external newsletter. Maybe you can talk about that.
So we have our development department produces a monthly donor newsletter. And then they also send out, I think it's every quarter, a print newsletter. And I think that still has a lot of value, because sometimes you have, especially maybe a lot of our older donors who might not want to be reading things on the computer. So the print newsletter is very valuable for them. And in terms of our staff newsletter, it's a mixture of, again, you wonder where you're going to get content, but there's so much that you can do, starting from birthdays, people who've gotten new certifications, awards that the organization has received. And you can also then, I spent a lot of time preparing the newsletter, and then I said, well, what am I going to do with this material afterwards? And I realized that I can actually use that material for my social media posts. I can develop it into longer articles, slightly longer pieces for the website. So again, like, repurposing your newsletter content is really important, and it's, how can I say, it maximizes the time that you've invested in producing that newsletter.
Do any of you see that? I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to add, I think on the repurposing point, we see all our content all the time, right? But most of the people out in the world see occasional bits of our content. And so this concept of repurposing, we repurpose a lot of stuff across different platforms over different times of year, because the assumption that everybody else is seeing everything that we see is totally wrong, right? And so the odds are fairly good that even if you push something in May, there's a subset of people who will never have seen it, never have noticed it, even if they subscribe to all your platforms. And so I think your point about repurposing is important. You don't have to recreate new every single time.
And people love to see themselves.
Yes.
It's very true. Whether it's a photo album on Facebook, we also post all our photos to Flickr. Those albums, I have found, from our corporate soccer tournament, for instance, get a lot more views than most of our albums of kids. I personally think the albums of the kids playing soccer are cooler, but people are browsing those albums and liking photos because they are in them. It's as simple as that. People like to be seen, whether it's a photo album or a newsletter, like to be recognized. So I think there's a lot of value in that. And the other thing I'm sad is, when it comes to the cards that we send out, I mean, just think about it from your perspective. When you receive like a handwritten card in the mail, which happens so rarely these days, how special is that card? That still means a lot to me. Like, if I get a card from my grandma or from somebody else in the mail, like, that's really special to me, because you just don't get that touch anymore. So I think the fact that it doesn't happen very often anymore makes it all that more powerful as a tool.
Something very special that our president CEO does every month is that she sends a handwritten card, written card to everyone whose birthday is that month. So we get in the mail. Congratulations from her.
Do any of you see newsletters going away anytime in the near future?
Maybe in writing, printed, I do see that. But it will be the same newsletter, but online.
I wouldn't say that I see them going away. I think it's still going to be a thing for a couple decades. I come from a journalism background, so I think about newspapers all the time. And, while there's been a lot of, rightfully so, fretting about the future of newspapers, they're not going away for quite a while. I mean, especially with all the news now, you see an uptick in subscriptions to the Post and the Times. And I kind of put newsletters in a similar group there. We have cut down on the number of people that we send our physical newsletter to, just because of costs. And it just makes more sense to reach out to a regional audience. But we'll continue to send it for quite a while. I think it's still an effective tool in addition to the email mass marketing.
I like the fact that newsletters give people a very quick snapshot of, lots of different things that are going on. So in a couple of pages, you can know everything that's happening in the organization. So I think there's a lot of value to that.
So some of the things that I took away from this part is that people like to see themselves and the staff recognition. I mean, one of the things as nonprofit managers we have to keep in mind is we can't compete in salaries, and one of the low-cost things that was talked about is putting a staff member out there in front of the audience makes them feel special and more engaged in your organization. There was a little bit of talk about the generational preferences, digital versus paper, but I also really appreciate the comment about it's not generation specific. When you get a handwritten comment or note, it makes a difference to you. One of the practices that I advocate with my clients is on the thank you letters for their donations is a real handwritten message with each one, not just some computer or something making it look like it was handwritten, but people can tell when someone took the time to write that personal message. And I really, really liked, and I'm going to take this back, is this repurposing content. It's one of those things that's so obvious you don't think about. But just because you write the article for one specific thing, not to use it only for that specific thing was great feedback. So thank you. I'm going to transition from there into one of the things that's important about newsletters is storytelling. And all of our finalists, and truthfully, all of our top 10 talked about the importance of storytelling and engaging our audiences. So I want to start with Mary Center this time because they specifically talked about engaging staff members in the storytelling process. Talked about how it humanized the results. Can you talk to us about storytelling?
Yeah, I think that storytelling is one of the most powerful tools that we have at Mary Center. We use them for grants. We use them for testimonials when we go to the city council. We use them for media. We use them for the newsletters. And our staff is the one, they're the ones who sent us, and they got so used to share the stories with us because they see the value that we get emails almost every day saying, I saw a patient today, it has improved so much. So by us collecting constantly stories, that help us for too many purposes. Statistics work very well, the dashboard too, but it's way different if you tell, let's say, telemedicine or technology opens door to health. If you write an article about our telemedicine program. But if to that I add that we have a guy like Carson, a patient like Carson, who has hypertension, who has diabetes, who has kidney failure, who is on dialysis and has to take 3 buses to go to the doctor. And then it's exhausting, it's expensive, and doesn't want to go to the doctor. And then we show that we have now a telemedicine program where we have our nurse, when we have a medical assistant with a small equipment going to his house and seeing our doctor at Mary Center from the computer. And now that his health has improved so much, people get that message easier. And then we can add to that the statistics and the impact of the program. So we use it a lot. We use it for everything. And that's the moment of feeling good for staff, for donors, for volunteers, for whoever who wants to get involved. When they see the stories that there's real people, media, when they come to interview our president, when they come to interview one of our providers, any staff members, they always want to see the personal story, to see the face of that story. So it's very effective.
And the stories don't even have to be very long. I think when I first started, I was writing very long stories, trying to explain all the details. But now actually I realize that even just within one paragraph, you can tell the whole story powerfully and people can get it quickly and easily. So it doesn't have to take too long to actually do it.
Who wants to?
Yeah, I was going to say there's a couple things I would add, and then Taylor can speak to this other report that we have. But my personal experience, I think the power of storytelling, while we've talked a lot about digital, it's not lost that in-person storytelling is really valuable too. Just like I said, having come back from some recent trips, having some of our youth who have been involved in our program for a number of years, for them to first person talk about their experiences. We had a dinner at the home of some of our folks, and having our different donors interact directly with our youth and having those guys tell their stories first person, it really humanizes what we do. It's one thing to read about things in a newsletter or to see a tweet, but when you hear from someone directly, sometimes that can get lost, but it's that's what people remember, you know, having a personal interaction, telling those stories first person. The other two things I was going to mention, one is that we've really made it a point to cultivate our blog with that first person angle. And so our various regional sites all contribute to that from the field blog. And so we have different days of the week that different sites contribute, whether it's South Africa or Cyprus. And they get very excited about, you know, today's my day and here's my story from my corner of the world, and growing that so everyone can share their own personal stories. And then Taylor can speak a little bit about spending the last several months putting together what we call our most significant change storytelling report.
Sure. So this is kind of a monitoring and evaluation tool, and that's not the topic of the webinar, but it's essentially an academic study that asks participants, asks board members, asks staff, you know, what's been the most significant change or impact the organization has had on you, whether it's meeting a friend from a different side, whether it's personal growth, et cetera. So after that, you know, a report has been developed to describe those changes. So it's everything from our board chair to a fellow that's 24 years old that served 2 years overseas in Israel, to a 13-year-old kid that met their first Arab friend. So it's pretty neat, and it's still in progress. And we should have it out later this year.
Well, I would add that the favorite part of my job every year is when I get to sit down and talk with a few alumni of our program. These are kids now in college, in high school, usually heading to college, almost always the first from their families to go to college, telling their DC Scores story, how they got involved with the organization, what kind of impact it had on them, and helping to mold their journey through all the obstacles that they faced. And then for me, getting to write those stories for our blog is incredibly powerful, uplifting, inspiring, and then of course getting to share them with our digital world. That really means a lot to me. And as a staff, and Bethany can speak to more of this too, we realized that DC Scores is not the easiest organization to explain, but we all have stories, whether we are on the program side of things, actually going out to the schools and seeing the program on a more day-to-day basis, or on the communications and development side of things, where maybe the only time we get to see the program is at our weekly game days in the spring and fall, or at our large events. But we all, whether we've been at the organization for 1 year or for 11 years, we all have a story that we can tell really well. So we've actually had storytelling workshops with someone who's a pro in this field to really help hone our stories, so that when we meet people, whether it's a potential new funder or partner, we can tell them our stories and try to give them just a sense, even if they haven't seen the program, of what we're all about.
One of the things I heard in this piece was this moment of feeling good. I'm going to write that down and steal it. I mean, when you think about it, our job in philanthropy is helping pair people with their greatest aspirations in impacting the world. And these storytellings help demonstrate how they've impacted the world. One of the questions that came in from a couple different people online is what are the most effective ways to collect these stories?
So this is hard, right? Because all of our staff are all doing their day job and saying, wait, stop, pause what you're doing, give me your story, is a hard thing. So one is teaching people how to recognize and tell stories, right? So Jake talked about our storytelling training. At staff meetings, we brought in a storytelling expert to train all of our staff. Everybody had to come back with a story. And every staff meeting now, we open with a different staff member telling their DC Scores story. Partly because it's a feel-good moment for everybody, partly because it forces that staff member to put in practice, every staff member to put in practice what we trained, and partly because it allows our development team to collect stories that way without having to actively gather them. So that's one. Two is we have site visit reports. Every time any staff member, myself included, goes to one of our 50, now 58 this year, schools or community centers where we're actually delivering programming, We have a site visit report. It's a Google form. It's focused on program quality. The last thing is tell us a story. So it's 15 questions you fill it out on your phone. Tell us a good story from today. So we try to capture them live. That actually feeds into a big Google document, and we can pull from there. So it's doing it on the fly. You don't have to remember, oh gosh, I had this great experience. I need to tell somebody about it, like 3 weeks from now. And then the last thing Jake does is we do ask staff to write blogs, to guest write things, to do video casts, to tweet live when they're at events, when they're at things. And so we can or Instagram or Facebook or whatever all these other channels are that I'm too old to know about. But we do grab all of that stuff. And then Jake looks at that and goes, okay, wait a minute, there's something more here. And we'll follow up on that, or say, hey, Jessica, our grant writer, here's something about this particular school you're interested in. Here's all the information and photos we got about it. This is where you can pull from. So it's part push, part pull, and part organic.
Yeah, I think the main thing is just there has to be collaboration amongst the organization. It's not just a communications responsibility. It relates to the programs team. It relates to the development team. It relates to the monitoring evaluation team. So it really has to be an interdepartmental exercise. Otherwise, it won't be successful. Everyone has to be on board. So bringing in a consultant or an expert in storytelling, I think will help everyone realize the importance of storytelling and how it could possibly impact their departments and ultimately the organization as a whole.
I would also say just get out and about in the office or to the different locations that you have, because I find that sometimes it's very tempting to just sit behind my desk and continue my work while eating lunch. But if you actually get out into the lunchroom, you meet other people, and then they share their stories with you sort of informally. And the other day we were just walking around one of our locations, and we got a story about a patient who had been in one of our super classes and lost a lot of weight. So that's something that we can promote, or that's a story that we can develop further. So I'd say get out there, meet your other team members, and as they get to know you more, they'll get more comfortable with sharing stories with you.
I would wholeheartedly echo that. I mean, there's only so many hours in a day, and it can be easy to be stuck behind a computer, but the more that you are spending time building relationships with all of your various constituents, the more that you will hear those stories organically. I think even outside of the walls of a particular event, a lot of times it's, over coffee in the morning or walking in between different sessions, and just the personal relationships you will, if you keep your ear open and also ask questions of people, much as you were saying, people like to see themselves, people like to talk about their own experiences. And so if you are inquisitive and you ask them, how did you get involved with our organization? What's your story? Why are you passionate about what we do? A lot of that will come through, and then that will lead to, hearing about other really impactful and powerful stories.
But also showing the staff the value of sharing the stories with us, because it could be that they let you know about whatever happens, but if you don't follow up, if then you don't do anything with the story, well, it's not worth it. They're busy. Why should I share if they're not putting it anywhere, or they're not highlighting the work that I'm doing, or the success of this patient with whatever treatment that he's getting. So we try to to do kudos as much as possible and show the work that person has been doing with the patient, but then again we use it as much as possible. So we get stories from very different sources, but also when we have our events, our press events, when we have graduations, we try to be there. We take most of the pictures, and at every event, we always get a story from there.
And I say and to build on that, letting people know when you're using their stories. So I will often use a blog, a staff member who's written off on an intern or a junior staffer to be the story for the weekly board email. And then I'll forward that and say, hey guys, I used your story today. That simple type of recognition of people knowing, because that feels good, right? And they're more inclined to do it again.
And we talk about repurposing too. Oftentimes we will write blogs about, we'll follow a team at a school through their poetry season. And they might not get a whole ton of engagement while we are posting them during that 12-week season, but then we'll hear 6 months later that our grants manager is using that blog series and those videos for a report that she needs. For that particular school or neighborhood, or for a funder who specifically funds our poetry program. So these things can be really important down the road as well, even if you're not necessarily seeing the big time real results right after you post the stories.
Something that's in this area, and it ties to a question that was asked online. I went to a conference last week or a couple weeks ago on communications, and one of the things that was really emphasized is not just the story, but the personalization of the story. To talk about Timmy and the impact on Timmy. And the question, and it's great for this panel because you all deal with this, is what are the issues that come up with privacy for kids, for patients? Do we use the real name? Do we not use a name at all? Do we use a picture? Do we not use a picture at all? How do you approach those?
For us, this is one of our biggest challenges because of the areas we work. Working in a place like Jerusalem, which is so divided, if a person, if a community member found out that a certain family's kid was participating in our program, they might be at serious risk of danger. So that's something that's number one on our mind, is the safety and protection of our participants. So before anything, goes out, especially in a place like Jerusalem, which is probably our hottest, our hottest site, we talk to the families themselves to make sure that they're okay with it. So people will sign releases in terms of privacy, et cetera, to do that. But, it's often on a case-by-case basis, depending on what's happening in that local community. So it's, communications, if we do something that's risky, it can put someone's family in danger. And we just had Mandy can do this more. She was actually in Jerusalem last week, and we held an event with the National Basketball Association, the NBA, for a court dedication. And, they wanted to come in there with their pictures and their video cameras and everything else. And we were just like, we can't do it. So it took a lot of conversations from our managing director in the Middle East program to have them understand that, this is kind of off limits from a publicity standpoint.
I think it just, a lot of it is collaboration and planning, that we have to be proactive as best we can, and then use layers, working very collaboratively with our staff to make sure that we go through, whether it be photos, video, making sure we cover just saying a person of a certain age as opposed to mentioning somebody's name, and just all the different resources that we might use to share any of those mediums, that we go through those filters with our various staff members to make sure that we have the safety of our participants in mind first and foremost.
We get certain amount of media requests or requests to do videos at Mary Center. And when we get those requests, and maybe because I'm a former reporter, it's always good to show the story, the people, but I'm the first one, and we're the first ones who will always have the filter before. If it's risky for a patient to be in the news because of the topic, we're the first ones to say, let's not use this person. Let's not even ask her. Or if they ask to change the name, we make sure that the reporter does that. And when they come to the waiting rooms, I'm always with them, and I explain everyone in the room, this is what's happened, this is where it's going to be. So when they agree to be in the video, when they agree to be in the picture, they're okay, and they sign their release. That's very important, because we don't want them to get surprised then because they were in the news. Or when I take a picture, when we take pictures, and sometimes the families, especially when we have mostly from Middle East, when they see the picture and say, I don't want you to publish the picture, what I do right away, I delete it. Because then when I save it in a folder, who never knows, we save the folders in a P drive where everyone has access to them, because we have the release forms. But when they don't want the picture to be posted, we don't want anyone who doesn't work with us, that they may not know that the patient doesn't want to be published. So we just delete it, just to keep the patient confidentiality safe.
I'd say we're fortunate not to have the level of privacy issues and concerns around personal safety that both of these other organizations have. We do have media releases in our student registration forms. So anytime a kid signs up, a parent can choose to opt out of it, of course, but that's very rare. So they're already signing up from the beginning when they're registering for our program each year, that we have the ability to interview kids, to use kids in that way. What we really focus on is making sure that when we have opportunities for kids to speak, to perform original poetry, for example, to talk on camera about something, that opportunity is a positive experience for the kid, not an exploitative experience for the kid. And so that's the line we really try to walk, is we do not want to put our kid up and have people I'll say ogling them for the wrong reasons and kind of pointing at them as some performer on stage, but celebrating and appreciating that kid's work, that kid's originality, that kid's creativity, that kid's skill set. And so that's about working with the reporters up front. It's about thinking about how we actually frame what we're writing and how we're writing about it. We tend to not use kids' last names. We might say Jake, age 12 would be the way that we would handle that. He's not 12, he looks great though, right? But we really try to be intentional about making sure that every time we are telling a story or presenting a kid to a third party, that it is in a very positive celebratory experience for that kid, and that we prepare the kid. So if we're bringing a kid to speak at the Aspen Institute, which we've done, or at other things, our staff spends time with the kid and the family members. Here's what's going to happen. Are you okay with it? Here's the experience. Here's how we're going to walk you through. Here's what we want you to prepare for. Here's how we're going to talk about your preparation. We're going to role play with you, so that for the kid themselves, which is a really positive learning experience for kids to have these opportunities as well. But we want to make sure they're prepared for it, that they're not just kind of thrown into something and told to sort of, sink or swim.
Do you get in your release form, is it a separate line for name and image, or to just say general release?
I do not know offhand. That's a good question. I know that over the years we have refined it further and further to make sure that we are able to utilize the release for the purposes we need.
What I do is we have a form where we specify what is it the video about, what day, if we were at which location. I even tried to put like the patient with what doctor, because I won't remember. If someone asks me for those releases, I will never know who's who. But if I know, if it was for a video for a specific, type of work that we're doing, or if it was with certain doctor, even what type of shirt, if it was, mom with boys in blue shirt, something like that. So when I see, I can recognize, but it's still hard, still a challenge.
I hear two different kind of levels here. One is organizations that get a general release as the participant enrolls in the program. And then there's a more specific, especially when security and privacy is at a higher level, like getting a very, very specific release, saying we want your picture on this issue for this use, and two different techniques that were shared with us.
Right, and going back to that, it's just, the release might be signed at the beginning of the program here in September, and things in April are very different. So double checking is very important for us, because, things can change in a community quite a bit in that 8-month lag. I agree.
Great, thank you. One of the things that we as nonprofits have that for-profits don't have in the same way is we have a group of Uber volunteers and ambassadors called board members. And they're wonderful, and they give us money, and they give us expertise, and they give us time. But there are also people that are doing it while they have many, many other things on their mind. And we've talked today about the importance of having a focused message, good storytelling. So what techniques do you use to make sure that your board members are good ambassadors, that they're both compelling and accurate?
I think that we're lucky, and Lita mentioned that according to the law, as a federally qualified health center, we have to have 51% of our board members being users of our services. So that really helps. They actually know, they've experienced what we offer, and they actually know. Even if you don't have that legal kind of requirement, I think it's still good to have your board members either visit your programs or participate, so they can actually see what goes on. Then they have a first-hand experience of it, and they're able to kind of speak accurately about it. We also send our staff newsletter to the board members every month, just so that they can know what's going on. There's a board liaison who works with them. There's a board portal where all the documents are put. So there's a number of different tools that we use. But I would say that getting the board members to actually use some of your services or experience that, and then also keeping them informed of all the developments, not over-communicating with them, kind of streamlining your communication with them, but just making sure that they know what's going on and they can speak about it.
We also invite certain staff members to some of the meetings that they have to explain the program, so the board get the information firsthand from the director of that program, so they get a sense of what we do from our staff. And also we keep them engaged, like in events that we do. We have a board member that works for the Brookings Institution, and he's always writing articles about different topics, and sometimes he can include that the work of Mary Center. So that's a way that they support us in communicate our our work, we create talking points for them so they, when they're out there talking about Mary Center, they know the right message to them. So that helps too.
Historically, one of the biggest challenges for us, especially going back to 2016 and before that, before we had domestic programming, has been connecting our board members and donors with our programs because of the geographic distance between. So actually last year, our board made it kind of a mandate for new board members they have to visit a program site within 12 months of joining the board. So whether that's a trip to Israel, we had a board trip to Israel actually last week, where a host of board members, I think 5 were on. So by seeing the program in action for a week, you can actually get the feel of what the mission is, what the program is, and be able to speak to it as opposed to just reading a newsletter. So it's important for our board, and this has come from the board themselves, that you have to see the program in action within the first 12 months.
So for us, it's built into how we manage our board from the get-go. So at new board member orientation every year, we have a very defined set of board cycles. They get a cheat sheet, sort of 2-pager with key stats, key numbers, key thing, just sort of like the basic things we want them to have and know. And one board member still several years later carries his around with him everywhere, so rips it out. He's like, oh yeah, I know these exact numbers and a few key talking points, the mission statement, things that are very succinct. So they have it all in one place. 2 is every week, every board member gets an email from me that looks like this. And the first thing is a story. The second thing is key things they should know. So they're always up to date with what is going on, the important things going on across the organization. They don't get anywhere near, nor do they need anywhere near the same level of information as individual staff need or even our coaches, but they get that. 3 is every board meeting, we have a mission moment of some sort. That varies. It's different at every meeting. So it's not, so it gives board members different angles into what's going on. So the mission moment might be a staff member coming and talking about a particular program experience. It might be a staff member coming and talking about a story. The upcoming board meeting in September, it's going to be a staff member leading 20 minutes of one of our poetry workshops. So board members get to experience that hands-on. Typically at our November board meeting, it's board members calling coaches and principals to thank them. And they get to have those one-on-one conversations. And so they're connecting with it. So it's not just me or senior management going, hey, this is what we do and this is why it's nice, but they're connecting with the mission and the experience in a whole bunch of different ways. As part of our board commitment form, every year, every board member is expected to volunteer at least one program event and to do at least one site visit. So like Taylor said, getting folks out in the field to actually see, touch, taste, experience what is going on, interacting with kids, interacting with coaches in a different way that's not filtered through staff. So all of this is built into the routine of how our board actually operates.
Mary Center and PeacePlayers, do you guys have mission moments?
We don't at board meetings currently, given the it's not like our board's all in DC. So our board meetings are typically 2 hours and they happen 3 times a year. So we don't have mission moments at our board meetings, but we do at our staff meetings.
We have our board members coming to, we do cultivation events, which is for new people who want to know about Mary Center or who hasn't been to Mary Center but has heard about Mary Center. So we give them a tour. We have a happy hour or a breakfast, and we usually have board members attending to this and giving tours. And we have staff picnics. The next one is coming in September, and we always have staff members coming to meet with us. We do after one of the board meetings in the year, we have a happy hour with the board. So whoever from the staff wants to attend, so we meet, the staff gets to meet the board members, and the board members gets to know more about us, those who are working at Mary Center. And that has been very effective as well. So our staff, our board has been very active in terms of being connected with our staff and with the programs.
Another way too is I think that is effective is kind of partnering board members. So if it's a new board member that's coming on, having a person that has had a longer tenure to kind of show them the ropes. So it's not the executive director, it's not a staff member, it's someone at a peer level that can support them and help them with talking points and their experiences as a board member.
So I really like the fact that all of our finalists here emphasized about getting the board engaged in the mission. Can't underestimate having the board members scooping the soup, being out there on the field, being out there with the participants. It's keeping them informed. We talked about the different emails and ways of keeping the board informed, the talking points and the cheat sheet. And I love Mission Moment. That's something that's actually been a buzz in the nonprofits for the last 4 or 5 years. Really making sure that the board meeting reconnects them to the mission. Before I move on to the next question, I want to point out to our web audience, if there's a topic that we haven't covered yet that you want to make sure we covered, now would be a good time to submit your questions. I'm going to ask I'm going to ask our next question while those questions are coming in, and we'll see what we have time for. People in-house can also, if you want to write down a question and pass it forward, especially about a topic we haven't covered that you wish we would cover, we'll see what we have time for. Keeping with the theme that we've been talking about today, and we touched on this in some of our other answers, but I want to focus in a little bit more. All of our finalists are multi-location operations. And I want to talk a little bit about what are the challenges that presents and how do you approach resolving them. You want to start with PeacePlayers?
Sure. So for us, like we mentioned before, technology is huge with the different time zones and the geographic distances between our sites and our hub here in DC. So collaboration, in the forms of text messages, in terms of Skype calls, a lot of times, a lot of companies will do conference calls, right, for group conversations. We use a technology source like Zoom where you can actually do video chats, which is huge. If you haven't seen someone in a couple months, to reconnect, over video is a great way to collaborate as opposed to just doing a conference line. So that's really important for us, is to ensure that collaboration. One of the things we invested in this summer was a staff retreat in Northern Ireland. So some of our leadership team headed over to Northern Ireland for a staff retreat, and the benefits of that kind of outweigh the costs of travel, et cetera, to foster collaboration and idea sharing between our staff.
Yeah, I mean, being a part of that trip, it was really helpful, just what you can pack into several days in all the knowledge sharing and best practices, where a lot of times we can get so in the weeds in what we're doing, you don't realize that somebody several time zones away is dealing with the same challenge, and how we can share those best practices with each other. The other thing that has become apparent that we're working to address is just our language challenge. So, we're in the process of updating our website, and we tend to clearly, we default to having things in English, and we have other languages that we work in. And so creating updated materials and links that reflect the languages that our constituents work in is something we're working towards as well.
I would say that one of the challenges is to make sure that you include people from all locations in your materials. When we have usually we're at the headquarters in Adams Morgan in DC, and so that's where we are, and so we can take more photos there. But people in other locations feel like they're left out, so you have to really make sure that you find somebody, either the site director of that location, who is going to be tasked with taking photos and sending them to you, so that you make sure that everyone feels included. I think that's been a challenge, and that's something that we're really always working on, to make sure that all the locations feel like their work is highlighted.
Something that has also helped us is that we have certain meetings where we gather as senior team members, directors, site directors. So there's different type of meetings that we have. And so at those meetings, we come from the different locations. Let's say if it's the senior leadership team meeting, we share all types of information that is happening throughout the organization, and then that information goes to the different sites. But also when we have the directors meeting, which also come from the different locations, we all learn as a team what's happening and what's going to happen if there's a new construction, if there's a new expansion, if there's a new program, if there's an award. We also try to do site visits. There's some key members in the staff that do site visits, so they see us, so they get familiar with us. And for us in communication, it's very helpful, as Hazel said, because that's how we get the stories. We do the videos, so and we include them, as I mentioned earlier, in the newsletter. So we include a link, so someone from our Maryland location can see what's happening in DC, or what the doctor in our Georgia location is doing in terms of certain program. So we use that a lot, the social media, the emails that we send out to the staff. And we have certain, like the picnic that we do to communicate, and that's a great moment for us to talk about something, of course, about work, but about personal things, so people get connected very well. and the fundraising events, when we have these cultivation events, when we have events where they can come to help, but also to meet with the rest of the staff and other donors, that helps a lot also to communicate and to get information.
We also had a all-staff meeting, I think it was a couple of months ago.
Mm-hmm.
So we didn't have our own venue that could fit that number of people. So we had to go to a hotel and rent a ballroom. So it was, there's an expense involved there, but it was definitely worth it because everybody can see, how big the organization is, and all our leadership. Each one got to give a presentation to update the staff on the latest that's happening in their department. So that was and it took a little time away from work for everybody, but it was definitely worth it.
So we're set up a little bit differently than either Mary Center or PeacePlayers. We have 10 times as many coaches in the field, but they're all part-time seasonal staff, contractors, as we do sort of permanent staff in headquarters. So we do a couple of different things. One is we have periodic in-person like everybody else. So we bring all of our coaches together 4 times a year for trainings throughout our season, and our headquarters staff are at those trainings as well, whether it's development team or program team or whomever, but all of our staff, all of our coaches come together around very specific coach trainings dedicated to preparing everybody for the season. Then we do preseason and midseason. Then we do some smaller ones for our smaller seasons, our winter and summer. So that's one, the periodic in-person, which is important for all the reasons these guys have said. 2 is we do very consistent electronic communications. Mm-hmm. So weekly coach emails, weekly staff emails, weekly board emails targeted to those audiences with information specific for those audiences that always follow the same format. So the content, the substance is different, but the format's the same. So people always know where to look. 3 is for our coaches, we have a support at DC Scores email address. And so there's one central email address that anybody who works with us out in the field can email about anything, and we can get it answered right away. That way nobody has to know, wait, who's this person and what's this email? You don't have to think about any of that. If it goes to that address, it will get answered within 24 hours. Our staff tries to respond to it. And so that allows it to be streamlined. So a new coach doesn't have to remember the person they met at training on Saturday. They just know there's one email address. I can get everything answered. The 4th thing we do so that our coaches out in the community, our partners, and our staff when they're out in the field have easy access to content from sites is aggressively tagged. So if you look through our Flickr, you look through our YouTube channels, they're tagged by school. They're tagged by site. They're tagged by partner. So a coach at Truesdale Education Campus can go through and quickly pull all of their photos or all of their team's videos for the year. If they need to share it with their principal, they need to share it with a parent or something. So they can easily get that resource without having to wait on us to go find it for them. And so we try to make that kind of stuff that's out there as easy as possible for them to access.
So my takeaway from that is multimodality. You guys are talking about not just one way. You're talking about sharing information. You're talking about making sure there's some opportunity to see each other, and you're talking about in person as well, and easy to share information. So there is no one answer to multi-location. A question from our audience is we talked a lot today about free tools. So the question is if you have a finite amount of money, what are the 1 or 2 things you should invest in, and do we have a sense of what they cost?
From a communication standpoint.
For communication standpoint.
Well, we just had our website redone from about April to mid-July, and we found a great pro bono developer who's actually based out of Lithuania. This isn't a free tool, but I would recommend checking out Catch a Fire. It's like Catch a Fire. It's a service. You can get an annual subscription. I think it's it's less than $2,000, and you can post up to 3 pro bono projects at a time through it, and there's no limit during a year. So if you're looking for a new website, which we got, or you need help with your current website, or your annual report, or messaging, you can post all of that through Catch a Fire. So that's one service. A free service that I use for curating images that we use for social media is Canva, Canva. Really easy to use, different shapes and sizes. Just plop your photos into it, overlay text. You can create things within minutes. That's a really simple one. And then my favorite Twitter-based tool that I use for desktop when I'm sitting at my desk in the office is TweetDeck. That's the best way, in my opinion, to filter your Twitter lists, your mentions, your direct messages. schedule out tweets with photos. That's a really good tool.
One resource that we used in the past to develop our website is there's this organization called Taproot, and they have pro bono work. They offer pro bono work to organizations like ours. It could be not only for the website, but it could be for branding, for strategic planning. So it's an application. You fill out the application, and then you get, instead of the money worth the work that they're doing, they assign a team of experts in that field, and they work with you to develop the entire website or to develop your strategic plan, whatever you're applying for. We also use, I think, Canva is for the picture, which is the one.
Sorry, I was going to talk about Hootsuite that we use to schedule Facebook posts and tweets, and that's about $10 a month. It's really very cheap, so it's useful. One thing, it's not a technology tool, but I would say just invest a little bit of money in a good camera, because there's nothing as important as beautiful pictures to tell your story. So it doesn't have to be a super expensive one, but just make sure that you get a good quality camera.
Anything else? No, good. Someone online asked specific recommendations on what to include in your staff and board emails.
So I can tell you what we include. So in the board emails, we always have some sort of visual story. We always have highlights, good important things to know, a micro ask, so something they can act on that they can do in 2 seconds, and important dates. And it's meant to be read in 30 seconds or less. So if it gets much longer than that, then someone has to skim it and we bold and do things to make it very easy to read the highlights in 30 seconds or less. The staff email is a lot longer, and the staff email was actually driven by conversations at staff meetings about how our staff wanted to get information and what was useful to them. So I didn't just make this up. But what it includes is sort of a standing note from my desk. So where is Bethany this week? What's going on? Because oftentimes I don't see staff. My time in the office doesn't necessarily coincide with theirs, so it gives them a sense of where my head is, what I'm focused on. It includes a section for each department, big highlights of what's happening in our communications and development department that are important for the rest of staff to know. Things we're applying for, reports due in grant world, that type of thing, site visits happening, and also where we are out in the community. So for example, this week said, Jake and I will be at this event this morning. So our staff always know when we're out. That's not just our development team, that's any staff if they're at any public event that's not program facing. It includes a new donations. So hey, if you know this person, this new donor, reach out and make sure you say thank you. And new institutional donations as well, so folks can keep track of what's happening in that world. It includes a section on programming, key things happening in program world. DCPS went back to school this week. That's important for us. We're in 30 some odd DCPS schools. So things like that, as well as it's game day Friday, you need to be there. Whatever's important for staff to know about that. It includes an admin operations department information. So it might be something like a training for staff training, or hey, we're having our staff retreat. Make sure it's on your calendar, but you're expected to be there. Block that out. Or hey, make sure you show up for this all staff. We have what's called the staff fun group that Jake heads that focuses on team culture. Make sure you know about this event this week. We want everybody to be there. And then it's got a board section. Are there board meetings this week? What's happening? What's the focus? Again, it's all bullet pointed. It's not a lot of text, but it's all that information very consistently. And it comes in that same format. There's not always content for every section and every newsletter every week. That's fine. I'll just put not applicable. Jake sends a separate weekly email to all staff that focuses on different activities.
Yeah, I send a pretty basic Monday morning email. And again, as Bethany was saying, very little text, bullet points, keep it simple, especially on Monday mornings when people are coming back from the weekend, trying to catch up, sorting through their inbox. That's really the only way to reach them. But it has the calendar for the week in terms of meetings that are happening, staff fun events that are happening, game days. It lists anyone who is out certain days of the week, which is also on our calendar, but it's helpful to see right there. And then it lists all of our most recent communications items, so blogs that we've written, videos we've produced, any earned media, and then occasionally I'll throw a few relevant news items at the bottom. But again, another email that you can scan in a very short time with useful information.
So we have very similar pieces in our monthly staff newsletter, but also we include new grants so that people know what's going on. Also, we have the letter from our president usually talks about special days that are being celebrated that month, and also our programs that are related to that, or something that's in the news and a program that we have related to that. For example, always, I mean, there's stuff about opioid abuse. And so we recently had a celebration for some of our participants in our recovery program. And so, you know, it'll be about that. Promotions, who's been promoted, like service pins, like who's celebrated 5 years at Marathon. People like to see themselves, as was mentioned earlier. And so, you know, big, beautiful pictures as much as we can, as much as space allows. Birthdays, as people who've run marathons or done century rides, people like to feel celebrated. So, and that's a way that we, you know, provides conversation. Next time you see that person, you'll be like, wow, congratulations, I saw that you did this ride. So it kind of helps to build community. Mm-hmm. And those are some of the things. You can include an infinite number of topics, but it's just space.
The two things I'd add that are important are recognition and gratitude, which we talked about earlier. And then second, and we'll talk about this more in the team building workshop in a couple of weeks. Please join that one too. Is just around helpfulness and collaboration. So one of our organizational values is developing a culture of collaboration. So we'll actually send these reports out each week that focus on how we're going to help different departments and different staff with their objectives that week. So we'll get into that more in the team building workshop. But it's again focused on collaboration.
Mm-hmm. You guys are talking about weekly emails, right?
We're weekly. Yeah. We do monthly.
Monthly.
But yeah.
Ben, how much time are you investing in writing these?
So that's a good question. So for me, because I write the weekly staff email, it actually anchors my week. I intentionally do it on Monday mornings because it allows me to take a moment Monday morning, make sure I know what's going on across the organization. And the process of actually organizing it this way for both the staff and the board, I actually do a separate one for my direct reports as well to focus more on what I'm doing, allows me to actually set and structure my week. So it's actually an extremely helpful thing. It probably takes me, for the staff, 1.5 hours, for the board 15 minutes. But it forces me to go through and look at our cash flow and look at our financial statements and look at our bank account and look at everybody's calendars and look at our program plan for the week. And so by the time I'm done writing it, I actually know what I need to focus on, which is great.
Yeah, I'd say we call them the accountability reports that it takes me 20 minutes to develop each week, 30 minutes. You know, it sets the tone for the week and, you know, it helps me map everything out in my head and on the calendar, et cetera. So it's extremely helpful.
With our monthly staff newsletter, before I used to wait until the end of the month and then kind of collate all the information. But now I've actually found that it's more helpful for me to, as I hear something, a news, you know, happening or whatever in our organization, I just write up a little, you know, blurb about it, and then I just throughout the month just keep adding to that. And then by the end of the month, the newsletter is actually written itself, and then I just, you know, format it.
Yeah, my Monday email is similar in terms of the communications items that I'm sending out. It's a running list, and I might be adding 2 or 3 from the previous week. So that's pretty simple. And then the calendar takes a couple minutes, and a few news items, knock it out in maybe 7 to 10 minutes.
The most important thing, I think, if you're going to do this is consistency. It's got to follow the same format every time. Because 1, that minimizes the amount of time that you spend on it. 2, it focuses you. And 3, it means your readers always know what they're getting. So they know what to look for. If you're writing something different every time or doing a different format, or one time it's bullet points and the next time it's, you know, reams of text, it's very much more time consuming and really confusing. Not as helpful for either you or the reader.
And there's also information that you need to get from others, from HR. Let's say if you have the birthday list, if you have the promotions. So set up that time for them and put it on their calendar. So you know that you're getting that, let's say if it's monthly, the 20th of the month. So you're prepared for that, because in the past, what used to happen is that, oh, we're going to send it out and we haven't received. Can you please send it? Oh, I'm busy. Can I send it tomorrow? So it keeps delaying the process. But if you have those dates established on your calendar, you send out the reminders, then you make sure that you'll be on time with your newsletter.
So we're just about out of time, but I want to give each organization just a minute or two, something that we didn't talk about today that you wanted us to talk about today, or something that you think is the most important thing for the audience to remember about communications. And I'm going to put Peace Players on the spot first.
I think for us, and Taylor add in here, but I think I would echo what he just mentioned about our helpfulness and accountability reports. Having been on the team for the last several weeks, it has really stuck out to me how much we are conscious about not just our day-to-day, what our job is and what our role is, but how we can help each other. We're a small, lean and mean team. And so we go through the exercise of making sure we see how can what we're doing in our day-to-day work be helpful to other departments, be helpful to the sites that we're having conference calls with, be grounded in how we can be accountable to each other, because we're only going to succeed in what we're doing if we're all working as a team. And so much of what we're doing and working in that sports space, it's a lot about teamwork. So while everyone has different job roles and departments and functions, we're very conscious of thinking as we head into discussions with each other, as we share these weekly reports, it's how can what I'm doing help another team member? And it really grounds you in kind of meeting the greater goals of what we're trying to do as an organization.
Yeah, and even for, like Jake said earlier, sometimes the communications department is 50% of one person's job, right? But if everyone feels accountable to the larger purpose of the organization, they realize communications is important. How can I pitch in? How can I help? And greater outputs and greater outcomes are achieved as a result.
I would add, first of all, create templates for the staff. So because they will be always coming to you to say, hey, I have a PowerPoint presentation, or I need to create a flyer, I need to create a postcard, whatever information that they want to put out. So if you have that handy and they know where it's stored, so they will know where to go and they can gather, and it's already approved. Branding, with consistency, with the colors, with the font and all that. So that is helpful. And the other one is think about having a crisis communications plan just in case something goes wrong. And it may bring bad media to you. So be prepared on the topics that may not be good for the organization, that maybe something goes bad and you need to know how to respond. Know or identify who are the key players that should be aware of that and who to contact, and to funnel all the information through communication so you are aware. You can work with your senior leadership team so you're prepared for that. So and have the numbers ready, the telephone numbers, the cell phones ready of people that you will need to contact in case of an emergency, because when that happens, it may be, we haven't used it, but we're preparing for that, just to be on the safe side.
Sorry. Yeah. So we've given a lot of different hints and tips today. I would say that don't feel like you have to be an expert in everything at once. I would say that maybe you can tackle like one area in which you're going to improve. So maybe it's your Facebook presence. So you'll work on that, and then you master that and try to get as much. There's a lot of free information online as well that you can find out to help you improve your Facebook presence. Once you feel like you've mastered that, then maybe you can tackle your Twitter presence. Maybe you can tackle your Instagram. So just to, don't have to do everything at once, and don't have to try to become an expert in everything at once. So just do in bite-sized pieces and make it manageable for yourself.
So the main thing I would say is remember the why of communications. It's very easy to be like, oh, there's this new social media thing. There's this. I can be reactive. I can do this. I can jump on 47, hashtag clicktivism campaigns today. And that's easy to react to in the world that we live in. But every time you spend time on communications, that's time you're not spending on something else, right? And everybody here is very limited amounts of time, right? And so being really intentional about the purpose of each communication or communication channel, communication method, communication activity you're doing. They can have more than one purpose. They can serve different purposes, but making sure that what you're communicating and the way you're communicating it is done intentionally for a specific purpose, and then it's achieving that purpose. And if it's not, stop it and do something else, because otherwise you're just wasting time.
Yeah, I would just piggyback on that and say, with every communication, think about who is your audience or who's your potential audience. And with the way that I'm framing this tweet, or the people that I'm tagging, or the organizations that I'm tagging, who's going to be interested in this? How can we get them to engage with us through this form of communication? I would also go back to what I said earlier. Content is key. Get great photos, get great videos. We have a superstar team of volunteer photographers and videographers who produce 90% of our content. We don't have a budget to pay for these people. So get great content, get people who can take those great photos and videos for you, if possible, if you are local. And then third, especially with a small staff, get that buy-in from your staff that communications is important, And then B, use those on staff. Have them tweet out from events. If they're not comfortable tweeting, which for us, probably 75% of them aren't, have them text you or email you photos and send you quotes and context from the events they're at so that you can post them out. If you have that staff buy-in, at the very least, you're going to get some staff members who are liking your Facebook posts, liking your Instagram posts, retweeting you, and that's a good base. It's a good start.
So thank you very much to our panelists from Peace Players, Mary Center, and DC Scores. It's been a privilege to work with you guys this year and read your applications and to learn from you. One of the things I always say at the end of anything like this is that I challenge our audience to turn something you learned today into action. Because if you don't turn it into action, and I mean this week, turn at least one thing you learned today into action, you haven't used your time well this morning. There was a lot of great tangible suggestions. Some of the ones that stuck out to me is to make sure you have a communications plan, or possible things you could do. Have a communications plan, collect stories, that moment of feeling good, the value of personal notes and handwritten notes, getting the board involved with on-site programming so that they get engaged in what you're doing, the power of a retreat, and recognizing staff through your communications if you can. Those were a couple of my takeaways from this morning. But I challenge you to turn it into action. Of course, none of this would be possible without the Center for Nonprofit Advancement and the presenting sponsor, PEPCO. So thank them for hosting this program and for hosting us today. And if you're in the DC, Maryland, Virginia area, we hope that we will see your application in future years. Thank you very much and have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Thanks.